So far, we've looked at spiritual warfare from a biblical perspective. And I've told you that the Bible presumes that there are powerful spiritual beings who are usually invisible, but are capable of having an impact on our physical world. We've seen a number of examples of this already in the Bible. But is there evidence that what the Bible claims is true? Now, first of all, I believe that the Bible itself is sufficient evidence of these kinds of things taking place around us, because I trust the Bible from studying its reliability on other issues. I assume that it's also reliable on this issue. But is there anything out there that would independently confirm what the Bible says specifically about these kinds of issues, the kinds of things that might be of interest to someone who is not a believer or who does not trust the Bible, that would be useful in pointing them to the truth of Scripture? I think there is. We're going to talk today about psychics, ghosts, and aliens. And what I want to do for each category is explain a little more about what the Bible says about this phenomenon in each case. What are some explanations for the kind of experiences people have with these things? But then I want to present that I think that the Bible offers the best or most reasonable explanation, not just for one of these things, but all three, and for other phenomenon as well that we could talk about, which I think makes the Bible and the biblical explanation of supernatural things the most reliable source or worldview we have that can account for all the data, all the different experiences that people have. So let's begin with psychics. What kind of experiences do people have with psychics? Well, let me give you one specific example to start off with. A psychic by the name of Troy Griffin has been reported in the news to be someone who has helped people locate victims of crime. So, for example, a 42-year-old mother of two who went missing for 3 weeks in Tennessee was contacted, or the family member was contacted by Troy Griffin, who claimed that he, when looking at Google Maps, could see pictures, places, and things. He says, "I saw the road where she vanished, and I felt there was drug use by the victim." Well, later, Griffin focused on 3 of Costner's friends that were on Facebook, the woman that was missing. And as he looked at them, 2 men and a woman stood out to him that he thought they were involved. And he sent all of his findings, all of the different feelings and senses he had in a report to the sister-in-law. They forwarded it to the police. And a few hours later, they found the body. Now, how do we account for an experience like this? This is not unique, but very often psychics have been associated with seeming to know things that they shouldn't be able to know, seeming to know things that no one else has seen, or having insight into what's going on into someone's personal life that the psychic has no way of knowing other than some kind of supernatural insight or revelation. How do we account for this? Well, there's the natural explanation. In other words, can we look at this from a scientific viewpoint that assumes there is no supernatural, that assumes the physical world is all that there is? Can we explain this? Well, the natural explanation would attempt to explain these things either by fraud, and it has been shown demonstratively that a number of psychics have committed fraud, that they will claim to have psychic abilities, but really they have an earpiece, they have someone else working with them, looking things up on Facebook, and so forth. But not in the case that I just recounted to you. There's no even way of seeing how fraud could have been committed. So although fraud could explain a number of cases, it wouldn't account for all of them. What about coincidence? Was this a lucky guess? Well, certainly psychics are wrong about this kind of thing very often. In fact, the FBI will not allow the use of psychics in investigations because very often psychics will say, hey, try this location or look here, and police will be sent on a sort of wild goose chase, wasting resources And so they're not 100%. They're not even high enough in the FBI's estimation to be worth the time to use them as a resource. However, there are other law agencies that think, maybe they're not 100%, but they're right enough that when we don't have any other leads, we'll go to them, we'll use them, because it does seem like they have insight often enough that is unexplainable, that there's something going on here beyond just lucky guessing. And for these reasons, I personally don't think that the natural material explanation alone is sufficient. I don't think you can account for all the experiences. I don't think that it is the best fit or that it is satisfying to say that all psychic abilities are purely coincidence, chance, or fraudulent. And so then we could talk about another explanation. What would the psychics themselves say? Well, the psychics would claim to have special abilities, insight, the ability to see things that is just out there. In the universe, there's some kind of sixth sense that they can tap into. I don't find this explanation satisfying either, because it raises a lot of questions. Where does this power and ability come from? How does one obtain it? Why do some people have it and not others? All of these kinds of questions, who manages this system? Why are they able to see certain things? Why are they wrong so often? All of these kinds of questions paint the picture of a very complicated system of unknown origin. It's not really an explanation just so much as, well, here's something of what's going on, but there isn't really a theory behind how it works. The Bible, I think, offers a much more satisfying explanation. The Bible talks about how there are truly supernatural beings that are usually invisible, that can communicate information to the living. We've already looked at an example of this in the book of Kings, how a spiritual being can come and put thoughts and put ideas into the minds of people. And the Bible itself speaks of a fortune teller or psychic in the book of Acts, for instance, that is influenced by a demonic spirit, by some kind of supernatural spirit. Now, this fits the data. Psychics may often be wrong because of fraud. Psychics may often be wrong because they have had some kind of insight or supernatural revelation from a spiritual being in the past. But sometimes they're trying to see things and they're not actually receiving direct communication. They're just trying to repeat the kind of experience they've had, and so that leads them to be prone to wanting to see things that they don't really have supernatural insight into. Or it could just be that these demonic beings are not always right, or often deceive or mislead the psychic. But when they are right, and when there is no other explanation, the biblical story can account for this. It's perfectly understandable why demonic beings, or why the rulers and authorities we looked at last week, may want to deceive people into believing in psychic powers, into controlling people in certain ways, into influencing people to turn them away from what the Bible says. And psychics might be one way to do this, that, psychics have real power, not like what you find in church, which is frankly what a lot of people believe. But it's the Bible that tells us who these beings are that are delivering the messages in a way that makes more sense than what you'll find anywhere else. So this is one example from psychics. I want to turn our attention to ghosts now. And there is a connection between psychics and ghosts. Some psychics are mediums, meaning that they are in the middle of the living and the dead, that they can deliver messages from those who have died to loved ones, to others who are trying to contact the dead. Can this actually take place? Are there such things as ghosts? And certainly not only have people tried to contact the dead through psychics with some very interesting experiences. Psychics sometimes know things about loved ones that how would they know? They never met this person or knew this person when they were alive, and yet they seem to know personal details. What about ghosts? Sightings, seeing people sitting in a chair, in your living room as you're going to get a drink in the middle of the night, or hearing footsteps going up and down the stairs as you're laying in bed. All these kinds of experiences are reported with pretty great regularity. We could assume that people have wild imaginations. People hallucinate. This would be the natural explanation for these things. Again, fraud for psychics, that they've somehow researched things ahead of time. And that could account for some of the data. Again, for me, I don't think that accounts for all of the data that people have in experiences with ghosts, what they see, information they hear. Even church members I've had have shared stories about how a loved one who has passed has left some kind of sign for them, some kind of signal that they're okay. Either a bird keeps showing up on their windowsill, and it was the favorite bird of their beloved one, and this happens day after day, when up until their loved one died, that didn't happen. But for some reason, a few days after their loved one dies, here's this bird showing up day after day. Is that their loved one trying to communicate to them? Or something falls over, a special book or a special piece of memory, a picture or something falls over without anyone being around a short time after a loved one dies. These kinds of stories make people wonder about ghosts. And again, I don't think a natural materialistic explanation can account for it all. I think the biblical explanation does. I don't think that just some kind of strange belief in the supernatural, that ghosts just are around, accounts for it either. I suppose if you're not going to the Bible and you're not going to a materialistic scientific explanation, the best explanation for ghosts is that yes, after we die, our spirits hang around for a certain period of time, or until something gets resolved, and our spirits are able to sometimes appear or mess with people or knock objects over, and then the spirits go usually off somewhere else in a reasonable amount of time. But is that really an explanation or just a description of the phenomenon? I think that's just a description. It doesn't really explain why are some spirits here longer than others. Why are they able to do some things but not a lot of things? Why can they appear in some contexts but not in others? Why is it so hit and miss that it's very rare or only in certain places or certain contexts? Who's in charge of this whole thing? Who is ordering it, designing it? Why does it work? How is it set up? How did it get set up? It raises more questions than answers, but the biblical model provides a background that says here's why we can expect these kinds of experiences and then do see these kinds of experiences taking place. Let me first address the question, does the Bible ever say anything about ghosts? And this may surprise some of you, but I think that the Bible in at least two places does describe the sighting of a ghost. One place I would turn to is John 17, verse 3. This is the story of the Transfiguration. Jesus goes up a mountain with three of his closest disciples, and he is transfigured before their eyes, and Moses and Elijah appear with Jesus and talk with Jesus. Now, according to the Bible, Elijah never physically died. He was caught up into heaven while he was still living in a chariot of fire. But Moses certainly did die many centuries, more than a millennium before he appears with Jesus at the Mount of Transfiguration, and he talks with Jesus. Technically, Moses was a ghost at that appearance, and he was recognized by Jesus and the disciples. He could communicate, and he has a time where he appears on earth with the disciples. So that would be a ghost sighting. At least in that one instance, it was the case that a ghost appeared to people, and the Bible would support that. There is another story that comes up a lot about ghosts, and that is found in 1 Samuel chapter 28. I want to read a portion of that here. King Saul at the time is wanting to speak to the prophet Samuel. Samuel used to guide Saul, the king of Israel, as far as what to do in going to battle, or whether to go to battle, or how to engage in the battle. But Samuel has died, and Saul wants to get a hold of him. And so Saul seeks out a medium. And you can read about all of this in 1 Samuel chapter 28. But Saul had made an order that all mediums should be put to death. And so when he first approaches a woman who he hears is a medium, she says, "Oh, Saul is putting everyone to death. I can't help you." And Saul swears to her in 1 Samuel 28:10, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this." Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." So the woman calls up Samuel. She sees Samuel. She now suddenly is surprised. She cries out and recognizes that this must be Saul who has come to her. I'll come back to that in a moment. What happens when Samuel comes up? Well, the king said to her, "Don't be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Now, there are those who will say that the woman didn't actually see Samuel, that it wasn't actually Samuel that appeared, but some other spirit. I don't believe that to be the case, because as I read the text itself says this is Samuel. The text itself describes him as physically having the appearance of Samuel. When Samuel speaks, he says nothing that is theologically in contradiction with God's word, and he says specifically some things about events that will take place the next day in the battle, and everything he says comes true. There's nothing in the text, other than maybe that we're uncomfortable with this happening, that would suggest that this is anyone other than Samuel. So I take the text at face value, and I believe that this is Samuel. I also think it's interesting that the woman is surprised when she sees Samuel. She's supposed to be a medium. She's supposed to be a professional at speaking to the dead and contacting dead spirits. But when she sees Samuel, it's as if she thinks something has gone terribly wrong. Something is not according to the ordinary way of things. She recognizes right away that this must be Saul here. Why is Samuel actually appearing when I called him up? She's not expecting this. That tells me a couple things. It tells me that it really was Samuel, and that it normally wasn't the case that the actual person would come up when a medium called a person. Instead, she was probably expecting to see some other kind of spirit that would pass on information to her so she could convince her client that she was really speaking to Samuel. The fact that it actually is Samuel catches her off guard. So I think that mediums in biblical times and even today can contact and get information from spirits, but not the actual person that they might claim to be speaking to. Instead, it is a spiritual force of evil, either a demonic spirit or one of the rulers and authorities or one of the angels working with them, who communicates information and can know a lot of things. These beings have been around since the beginning of the creation of man, at least. These beings can see things maybe when others think no one is looking. These beings can collect information. And so they could know things and pass information on to a psychic or medium and be accurate in some of the things that they say. Again, the motive being deception, to empower a psychic or to empower belief in an afterlife that is in conflict with a biblical view, to give false hope to people, perhaps, that someone outside of faith in Jesus Christ can have eternal life and have their sins forgiven. There could be all kinds of reasons why spiritual forces who know certain things could use that information through psychics to deceive people. And I think that we see some of these kinds of experiences occurring. The Bible is equipped to give us an adequate explanation as to what is going on. I don't think naturalism can explain it, nor can the psychics themselves offer a satisfactory explanation of what they're able to do. Now, I will say, let me caution here, that the Bible expressly forbids contacting the dead, using mediums, going to psychics, precisely because the Bible presumes that any of this kind of activity is not seeking revelation from God or the angels that are with God, but from those spiritual forces of evil that Paul warns us against in Ephesians 6:12. So none of this is me encouraging you to make use of this information. It is prohibited by Scripture, but nevertheless, people will say that they've had these experiences, that they've had information from a loved one shared with them, and I'm simply pointing out that the biblical view of spiritual warfare can account for all of these kinds of experiences in a way nothing else can, and that we can therefore trust the Bible. I will say a word. What about a Christian person who is not seeking out a contact with the dead or visiting a medium, and says, I believe a loved one sent me a message, a loved one knocked over that picture frame, or a loved one in some way communicated to me that they're okay? Can we discount all of that because the Bible says it is appointed for man to die once and after that to face judgment, and that the dead can have no contact with the living? Well, let me say a couple things. First, I think the Bible does give us two examples where the dead contact the living, so it is not impossible. Secondly, I would say it's highly out of the ordinary. I think God makes for some peculiar reason, an exception to the general rule that the dead cannot contact the living in these two very unusual circumstances that I've given you. But in my understanding of the Scriptures, I think these may be the only two times that the dead have directly contacted the living, and if there are other times, they're probably exceedingly rare. Neither, though, would I discount the experiences that people have had. There is a way that the Bible could account for that people could have these kinds of experiences, and it could be that an angel acting on behalf of a loved one, or perhaps at the request of a loved one, or in some way just to comfort a grieving loved one, an angel could come and have any number of these kinds of signs occur to bring comfort to a loved one, or sort of bring a message on their behalf. To me, that would be a better fit biblically, and that accounts for some of the experiences without just dismissing all of them out of hand. I would fully expect that as you watch this video, I may hear from some of you, as I've often heard from others, that have said, I've never felt the freedom to talk about this or share this, but I'd love to hear from you. If you have certain experiences, comment them, contact me, let me know the kind of things maybe that you have experienced along these lines. Finally, let's talk about aliens. That's on the back sheet if you're taking notes. I think aliens present the most compelling evidence of all of what the Bible describes about spiritual warfare. First, what kind of experiences are we talking about? Well, American Airlines just a few weeks ago had a pilot who reported seeing a mysterious object in the sky. We have heard of the Navy pilots who have also, in just the last 2 years, reported seeing some very strange objects in the sky, and even have video of that. And the U.S. military recently revealed that they are indeed studying and trying to figure out what these objects were. They don't know what they were, and the video that we have, which you can find on Google pretty easily, is authentic video. It wasn't doctored by someone else. And so we have a number of these kinds of videos, pictures of unidentified objects. Now, UFOs are quite common. People will report seeing something in the sky and they don't know what it is, so it's unidentified. But when you go through reports of these kinds of experiences, 98% of the time or more, it is easy to discover what it is they saw. There was a missile test that day, there was a rocket launch, there was a satellite right there at that time, and you can, through some research, figure out, okay, here's what the person was seeing. But again, like this Navy incident that happened in the last 2 years, the American Airlines incident more recently, other events like in 1997 over Phoenix, there are these lights that appeared in a V-shaped pattern. The military is still investigating that. There are these handful of experiences of sightings of things that have no known physical cause. And we might go to conspiracies that the government is testing out certain military technology that they don't want people to know about. That may account for some of the experiences. We can't know till much later if that accounts for it or not. But even things that have been declassified from the government show that the government itself doesn't really know what's going on in all these cases. So what accounts for this kind of experience? Well, there is the natural explanation that would say, well, there's some report out there that hasn't been declassified yet. There's some illusion in the sky because of water vapor and the sun hitting in a certain way, or something about the camera or the glare on the window of the airplane that could somehow account for all these experiences. That doesn't satisfy me. And certainly many who look into the appearance of UFOs will say that doesn't satisfy them either. I mean, the military has acknowledged they are putting a lot of research into studying this phenomenon. There isn't any easy physical explanation. Well, there is one other physical explanation, and that is that some kind of advanced civilization living in some other distant part of the galaxy is coming to visit us, and we are seeing their spaceships in some sense. This explanation does not satisfy me either. And the reason is because, scientifically speaking, it is impossible for a civilization, for some life form to travel in a spaceship hundreds, thousands, millions of light years through space. We don't really have any reason to believe there's any planet that could possibly host intelligent life that's within thousands of light years of us. And when you talk about the physics of the problem, I know in science fiction there's always some way that you can travel faster than the speed of light or go through a wormhole or something like that. But where the state of modern understanding of modern physics is today, no, it really would take millions of years, even with some unheard of technology that we are unfathomably away from discovering. Even with that kind of technology assumed and factored in, the physics of it would make it impossible for any kind of living being like that to get to our planet within several millions of years. And so you have these beings that travel for millions of years to visit our planet, not knowing what would be here when they left, because human beings weren't even here millions of years ago, and they have spent time just sort of spying on us, sort of appearing here and there, but never making themselves known, with no clear motive or intention of what they are doing. To make matters worse, most alien enthusiasts will say that we've been visited by these beings for thousands of years. And that you can tell by some of the information we have. Pyramids seem to be built with some kind of information from an ancient civilization sharing technology with them. And then you see patterns between the pyramids in Egypt and some of the pyramids in Mesopotamia, and then pyramid-like buildings, ziggurats in South America and Central America. And you see other images, paintings, drawings across cultures of objects in the sky, of dragons, of snakes that have similar appearances or seem to be having a similar source of information. And so this means that these beings have been visiting us for quite a long time. And I would simply raise the question, okay, for what purpose have they been visiting us for thousands of years? Never fully making themselves known, but sharing information with some civilizations at different times, almost off the radar, but occasionally seen. And this has been going on for thousands of years. Why? What is their motive? What is their purpose? Why do they hover around and watch us? None of this makes any sense to me. But I think the biblical view can account for all of that data quite plainly and clearly. Let me read one passage that often comes up when people are talking about aliens in the Bible. Ezekiel chapter 1 is one place, not the only one, but probably the most significant place. I'm going to read the key passage here in Ezekiel 1, verses 15 through 19. And in Ezekiel 1, Ezekiel is seeing a vision, and he's clearly seeing beings he identifies as angels. And he gives this description. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature, with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change directions as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. And when the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. So Ezekiel is clearly saying that there are certain angels, supernatural beings out there that are usually invisible, that are accompanied by these discs that appear to be some kind of craft, that are even surrounded by eyes all around, which might remind you of modern depictions of UFOs, having the round windows, portholes all the way around the craft. And they can move in unexpected ways. They can suddenly rise, suddenly change directions. And this is not unlike what people report in UFO sightings, that these spacecraft, as they presume they are, can move in ways that seem to defy physics, that seem to be not from this world. The technology is more advanced than this world, or it seems otherworldly. And even many will say, see, this is evidence that aliens were visiting people in ancient Mesopotamia, because here's an account in the Bible of one of these sightings. But I would just come back again and say, I don't think that ancient civilizations spying and appearing at different times and sort of tampering with us at times, but never really appearing or never having any clear motive or reason for being here, is a satisfactory explanation. What Ezekiel himself says about the vision is that these are supernatural beings, that they aren't from another planet, that they have a vested interest in this planet, that they are the spiritual forces of evil, or perhaps of good in some cases, that are engaged in battle. Just as we saw in Daniel chapter 10, an angel comes to see Daniel and is held up by a ruler or authority of the heavenly realms, the prince of Persia. And there's a battle. Michael the archangel comes. And so these kinds of things are going on invisibly in the world around us. At times, they can be seen. And that's what we experience. Things that seem to be from outside of this world, that from time to time are visible, that seem to defy the law of physics. And another thing that I find interesting is they are often, or always, are grainy photos. Anytime we do get an image or video, it's blurry, it's in the distance, it's hard to tell exactly what it is. That, to me, would fit with exactly what we would expect from the kind of beings the Bible describes as angels, either good angels or those who are working with the rulers and authorities of this world. So for all of these reasons, I think that the Bible offers an explanation as to what's going on that accounts for all of the different experiences people have, whether psychics, ghosts, aliens, or some of the other paranormal experiences that I'm not going to go into here. But if you have questions, have other experiences to share, I'd love to hear back from you or comment on this video. I'd love to keep the discussion going. I hope this is helpful for us as believers. Many people are fascinated in these topics that really have no interest in the Bible, but that can be a wonderful bridge to opening up and talking about how the Bible addresses and offers its own view and explanation for these kinds of experiences.